You ever underestimate someone, and I mean really underestimate them, only to have it blow up in your face? Well, imagine making that same mistake, but on a global scale. A miscalculation so big, so rooted in pure arrogance, that it doesn't just cost you a game, it costs you the entire world. We're going to dive into what might be the single biggest strategic blunder of World War II, a total failure of imagination that ultimately doomed the Third Reich.
And here it is, the one quote that says it all. You have to picture the scene, right? It's 1943, things are not going Germany's way, and the head of their Air Force, Hermann Göring, is trying to pump up his demoralized factory bosses. Now, this wasn't some throwaway line. This was what they truly believed. It was this deeply held conviction that America was just soft, a nation of consumers obsessed with jazz and Coca-Cola, totally incapable of the grim, hard business of war. They saw the shiny surface and completely missed the steel hiding right underneath.
And that's really the question, isn't it? How does a regime that prided itself on being so ruthless and efficient get something so fundamentally wrong? This wasn't just a simple intelligence failure. Oh no. This was a willful, ideological blindness. It was a delusion they desperately clung to, even as the sky over Europe started filling with evidence that they had made a fatal mistake.
So, to really get to the bottom of this, you have to understand the Nazi worldview. It wasn't just a political party. It was like a pair of warped glasses that distorted everything they looked at. And when they looked at America through those glasses, all they saw was everything they hated and absolutely nothing they needed to fear.
See, it wasn't just one thing. It was a whole cascade of errors, one feeding into the next. Göring himself was a World War I pilot, and he remembered an America that showed up to the last war with barely any modern planes. Their spies were sending back reports saying, "Don't worry, the US can't possibly build more than a few hundred planes a month." But the real poison, the rotten core of it all, was their own ideology. They truly believed that a diverse, multiracial society, a nation of immigrants, was fundamentally weak and chaotic. Hitler literally called it a mongrel nation, totally incapable of the kind of unity and discipline needed to win a war.
But here's the thing. While the leadership in Berlin was laughing and scoffing, something was happening in America. A sleeping giant wasn't just stirring, it was about to completely rewrite the rules of industrial production. And it was all being led by a president who knew exactly what was at stake, and an industrialist who, get this, had never built a single ship in his entire life.
Can you just imagine being in Germany and hearing this? It's early 1942, and FDR gets on the radio and just throws down this unbelievable number, 60,000 planes, then 125,000 the next year. You know what happened? The Nazi propaganda minister, Goebbels, wrote in his diary that Hitler literally laughed out loud when he heard it. He thought it was ridiculous, a classic piece of American bluffing. They just could not wrap their heads around the idea that a nation could scale up that fast. They heard a bluff. America heard a deadline.
And nothing shows the American approach better than this, the Liberty ship. German intelligence reports called it a slow, ugly duckling. And you know what? They were right. It wasn't fast. It wasn't pretty. But they completely, totally missed the point. Its genius wasn't how it sailed. It was how it was made. This guy, Henry Kaiser, designed it to be built in massive, prefabricated sections, welded together like a giant Lego set. It wasn't designed to be a masterpiece. It was designed to be a weapon.
And this is where the story shifts from just talk and predictions to the mind-bending reality of production. Because that simple, ugly little ship became the symbol of an industrial learning curve so steep it looked less like manufacturing and more like some kind of magic trick.
Okay, just look at the speed of this improvement. It's incredible. The very first ship took 244 days. And you can bet German intelligence saw that and thought, "See? We told you so." But then the 10th ship took just 105 days. By January, the average was down to 70. And then, in September 1942, they built an entire ship in 10 days. The Germans heard about it and dismissed it as a propaganda stunt. They still didn't get it.
They thought it was a stunt? Okay, so Kaiser's response was basically, hold my beer. In November 1942, for the whole world to see, they laid the keel for the SS Robert E. Peary. A little over 4.5 days later, it was sliding into the water, completely finished. This wasn't just launching a ship, it was a message. It was an industrial shot across the bow, telling the Axis powers that the old rules were officially over.
And that stunt very quickly just became the new normal. So by the time Göring was making his cracks about razor blades, this was the reality on the ground. Not one ship every few months, a new one was hitting the water every 8 hours, 3 a day. A relentless,
non-stop tide of steel that Germany's U-boats were about to drown in.
So who were these people performing these miracles? I think this is the most powerful part of the whole story, because it's the ultimate answer to that twisted Nazi ideology. The so-called arsenal of democracy wasn't built by some mythical master race. It was built by the exact same people the Nazis looked down on as inferior.
I mean, these numbers tell such an incredible story. More than a third of the workers were women, the iconic Rosie the Riveters, proving they could weld and build with the best of them. 14% were African Americans, who, despite segregation, grabbed these new opportunities. And the rest, immigrants, farmers who'd never seen a factory, clerks, teachers. This was the face of that soft America, and it turned out to be their greatest hidden strength.
And now look at this contrast. It is night and day. In America, you had motivated workers earning good money, proud of what they were doing. They were the ones coming up with innovations that saved millions of hours. And in Germany, their war machine was running on the backs of millions of slave laborers from countries they had conquered. People who would risk being executed just to sabotage a production line. One system was fueled by freedom. The other was fueled by fear.
All right, so this is where the assembly line connects directly to the front line, because all this production turned the war, especially the critical Battle of the Atlantic, into a simple, brutal math problem, a problem Germany had absolutely no way of solving. These numbers, they're not just numbers. They are the final score. Almost 3 times as many planes, more than 2 million more trucks, the things that actually let an army move, 5 times the ammunition. At this point, it's not really a war anymore. It's an industrial avalanche, and the German army is being buried under it. And this chart, this single chart, basically explains the entire war in the Atlantic. For every single U-boat Germany managed to build and send out, the Allies, mostly the US, built 5 massive merchant ships to replace the ones that were sunk. Your U-boat captains could be the best in the world, but they were fighting a war of numbers. They were mathematically guaranteed to lose.
You can just feel the creeping despair in this quote from an actual U-boat commander. Imagine the psychological effect of that. You risk your life, you sink a ship, and you know that by the time you get back to port, 3 more have already taken its place. You realize you're not fighting sailors anymore, you're fighting the American factory itself.
And this is what it all led to. D-Day. Almost 7,000 ships closing in on the coast of Normandy. One of the German generals there, in a state of shock, radioed back to headquarters and said, "The sea is black with ships." He said it wasn't an invasion, it looked like a migration. This right here. This was Göring's razor blade miscalculation, made real, arriving with guns blazing.
So, after Germany surrendered, the fighting was over, but the reckoning was just beginning. And at the Nuremberg trials, that myth of supremacy was finally put to rest, killed by the hard, cold reality of production numbers.
You know, when the prosecutors at Nuremberg showed Göring the final production numbers, the planes, the tanks, the 2,710 Liberty ships, there was nowhere left for him to run. His entire worldview just crumbled against a spreadsheet. He told the prison psychiatrist, "They buried us under an avalanche of production." The man who mocked razor blades had to finally admit he'd been buried by them.
And this is exactly why this story still matters so much. The legacy of that incredible effort changed our world. It proved that a free and diverse people could outproduce a state run by terror. The women and minorities who built those ships kicked open doors in the American workforce that never really closed again. Oh, and that healthcare system that Henry Kaiser set up for his year shipyard workers? You might have heard of it. Today, it's called Kaiser Permanente.
So really, that's the bottom line. Those ugly duckling ships were never just about carrying cargo. Every single one that slid into the water was a 10,000-ton argument that a nation's true strength isn't found in some myth of racial purity, but in its ability to bring all its people, every race, every gender, every background, together for a common purpose.
And that leaves us with a pretty tough question to chew on, doesn't it? This whole story is a timeless warning about the danger of arrogance, about the blindness that comes from prejudice. It forces us to look around today and ask ourselves, who are we underestimating right now? What group of people, what new technology, what nation are we casually dismissing as just makers of refrigerators and razor blades, completely blind to the avalanche they might be about to unleash?